It is hard to believe we are at the end of our 6-week spirituality series, and it has been amazing. I wanted to take you all on a journey of where we've been. We started with spirituality as a discipline when Jude introduced us to that 6 weeks ago. And then Reverend Mark talked about the spirituality of transformation and what it means to be a spiritual person and transform yourself from the inside out. Spiritual director Julie Barrios talked about risk and reward, and in the competitive city of San Francisco, what it means for us to take types of risks we might not normally take. Our resident yogi, Darren, he brought us the spirituality of yoga, and a great story about him running around his garage in his underwear. You'll have to ask him about that. And then Jude shared his grandmother's meatball, not the recipe, which I'm still waiting for, with us last week, and the spirituality of food and what food and food traditions can bring to us in our spiritual lives. And today, we're wrapping that up with the spirituality of hope. I want to head back into our gospel reading for just a second. This is one of my favorite Jesus moments. We have this woman who's been bleeding for years and years and has seen the best doctors in town over and over again, and the pain and the suffering won't stop. It won't stop, and she doesn't know what to do, but she hears of this guy, Jesus, in the city, and she said, I have to see him. I have to go to him, and, cuts through the crowds, crawls past everybody, and just touches his cloak, and she's healed. It's a bizarre story. It's a bizarre idea, the idea that someone can touch you and you're just instantly healed. You're instantly fixed. I wish things were that easy. I remember the first time I really heard this story. I was at a church camp. This was right after college. I was at a church retreat, and Tony Campolo, who's an evangelical Baptist preacher, told this story. And he related it to this moment he had when he was on an airplane next to this woman who they got to talking, and he said he was a pastor. So she started kind of just going over what was going on with her. And he remembered this story and just gave her a little bit of a nudge. And he said he felt that same thing, this power that Jesus felt, this power came out of him and just kind of went into her when she needed it most. I didn't know what to do with that. It sounded a little like hippy-dippy to me. But I love this idea of this real living energy, this real spirit. And I got to thinking, we've had moments like that, right? We're in a room or anywhere, and somebody walks into the room, and the energy just changes. Sometimes it's good, other times it's not. But we know what that energy is. We know what that feels like. It's a real thing. And this just goes to show that the story that we heard today, it's a powerful story. It's a real story. It's a woman who trusts in God. It's a story of healing. And I think it's a beautiful story of hope. Tony Campolo saw himself in the role of Jesus in this story. He had the ability to give a little bit of the Spirit to someone who needed it. Well, just a few months after I heard Tony speak, this was many years ago, I found myself a lot like the woman in the story. I didn't know it at the time, but I was years into a deep, deep depression. And for those of you who haven't dealt with that before, it's the best way I can describe it is this sense of feeling trapped inside yourself without the energy to get out. It's powerlessness, and inside are all these feelings and voices telling you all of the worst things about yourself, and you can't fight back. You just don't have it in you. A lot of people, think of it as sadness, but it's more that just nothing mattered. Everything's off. My job didn't matter, relationships didn't matter, nothing cool that I was doing mattered. I just felt disconnected from everyone and everything. And actually, my favorite time of the day was when I got to go to sleep because I could disconnect without feeling guilty. So somewhere in all this, I don't really know where this came from, but I knew something was wrong and actually started to do what this woman did. I thought Jesus would fix it. So I started going to church. That was going to solve all the problems. That's what church is for, I thought. And I spent years in church, doing all these things, reaching for that cloak of Jesus as many times as I could, and everything just kept getting worse. I started going home early from work. I stopped seeing friends, and I felt more and more disconnected from the world around me. But one of the things that did get me through was this thing we did at church. We actually would go out into the neighborhoods of Los Angeles, where I was living at the time, and we would chat with folks about, how can we pray for you? Just like, what's going on? If we're going to do anything, we're going to pray for you. And I liked that because there was no agenda. We were just listening to folks. We were just hearing what was on their minds. And those moments made me feel connected. I got to connect with people in a very deep way. And I didn't question what was happening, but I knew that it felt right. And I liked that. So one day, about 9 or so years ago, when I was actually feeling a little bit like myself, I decided to go down to downtown LA and do what we were doing at church by myself. But I didn't want to ask people about prayer stuff. It was too Jesus-y for me at the time, and I still think it's a little too Jesus-y for me right now. That's okay. But I decided to ask folks one question, and the question was, what do you hope for? It's a simple question. It's not an easy question. It's got lots of answers, but it was a way for people to talk about important stuff, important things that mattered to them, things that were at the top of their minds that they needed to talk about. So I talked with a ton of folks. I actually was walking down Hope Street in downtown LA, and I talked with, the Subway sandwich guy, a barista, folks waiting for the bus, people walking across the street. I was not ashamed to just talk with anybody. And everybody shared these beautiful stories of the hope of healthy family members, for security for themselves. Some guy had this phantom pain that had taken over his arm, and he hoped that he would figure out what was going on. Another person hoped that their cousin, who was taken away from them by the state of California, would be returned to them. These very raw, honest, real things. And I felt alive in these. I felt alive just connecting with people in this way. And I can't tell you how much that changed me. But then I met this guy. His name's Bob, in downtown LA. We were in front of, I think, the Marriott Hotel or something. And I didn't want to approach him. Bob breathes out of like a trach tube, and he was like hacking lung all over everything on the street, and I didn't want to approach him. And I did, and we ended up talking, and we just got to know each other a little bit. He told me about how he lived on the streets of Los Angeles and a little bit about his story. And he grew up being abused by his uncle and several other family members, and he told his parents and other family members about this, and all they could tell him was, no, that's not happening. How dare you talk about our family like that? That is not how we do this. You're wrong. You're lying. And that went on for years and years and years and years until he could finally move away. And I asked him, say, Bob, I'm out here asking people this question for this little art project I'm doing. What do you hope for? And Bob's answer was honesty. He said no one in his entire life had been honest with him, and he would never hope that anyone would have to endure that. His entire family lied to him up to that point, and he wanted everyone to be honest with one another, no matter what, because he knew what it was like to be lied to. And we talked a little more about that, and I gave Bob a hug and turned the corner. I said, thank you. I turned the corner, and I was literally brought to my knees on the street corner in Los Angeles, and I looked up, and there was this electric thing inside of me, this wonderful warmth that literally shot out of me into every single person on the street. Every single person, with this incredible sense of love and hope, and the biggest message that everyone mattered. And I'm just there in tears. I have never, ever had a spiritual experience in my life. I never expected to have that. I never asked to have that. But that is the moment that Bob and this interaction changed my life. And that is the spirit, that beautiful warmth, electric spirit that I've been chasing ever since that day. And I followed it after that day. I followed it and started working with schools and worked with churches and worked with middle schools in Italy, asking people about hope and sending students out to ask their neighbors all about hope. I even got little moleskin journals that I passed around planes that people could write their hopes in. I've got boxes of them at home. And I listened, and we listened. I did this with friends and other groups and stuff around LA to thousands of people from all over the world. And they hoped for all sorts of different things, big things, little things, desperate things, personal things, but all honest, real, perfect things. And what I took from that is that each one of us, no matter what we're going through, there's some place in us that can always imagine, no matter what, can always imagine something more and something better. That there's a strength within us that's always fighting for wrong to be made right. There's a power within us that is waiting for something dead to come alive again. There's a spirit burning inside of us that can never be put out. And we're all connected by it. We're all connected by it. And that shouldn't surprise us. The entire Bible starts this way. Rewind what Sister Dana read for us, before the animals, before the plants, before the oceans, before the land, before the stars, before the sky, before the sun, before it all, there was the Spirit. And the Spirit was here first. And the Spirit, our Genesis poet says, was brooding like a bird over the nothingness of this creation. Brooding like a caring, watchful, hopeful mother hen. The Spirit waited patiently over, above, inside, through, around all of this, waiting for new life to hatch, imagining the goodness and the life that would come from it, and wanting it desperately to spring into being. And look what happened. The sun, the sky, the stars, the land, the oceans, the plants, the animals, and us. And it was all good. It was all good. Church, here's what I want you to know today. God started all of this, out there, here, wherever, with that spirit of hope. And God infused that same spirit into your very soul. And every time you hope for the big things, the small things, the help me God things, the wouldn't it be better things, every time you hope, that is the Spirit working inside of you. And it is a power that can bring life to you and to all the places that need it. You have that in you. Live from that place, always live from that place. And actually, I want us to live from that place now. If you can grab that card that was on your seat and find a pencil, should be someone on your row. Grab that card and write what you hope for. And it can be anything for you, for a friend, for a family member, for the world, for our nation, for this church. Write it down. We're going to collect those, and we're going to read some of those together as we sing and pray. So give you a moment just to write whatever you hope for and be as honest and real as you like.